What do you think? That's all I think.
Sounds good. Yeah. Is this okay or is it like weird?
I can check my agent.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. Awesome. I think we can do next introduction.
Right.
Oh, that's fine. There might be a remote somewhere. Awesome. And when you're doing intros, just come to the front here. Okay. Okay. Alrighty, everyone. Welcome to our first in-person breakthrough. This is so exciting.
Wow, it's so good to see your lovely faces.
We're so happy to have you, and yeah, we'll get the session started.
Yeah, so feel free to engage with questions. You guys have all come prepared with questions, so this should be super fun, interactive, and live. And we pass it off to Joe, who's done the research and who has made today possible.
Cool, yeah. So today's session is going to be a case study. We have Arjun here from Floodgate, which is a really amazing VC. So how it's going to work essentially is the first 30 minutes, Arjun is going to talk a bit about his investment philosophy. So kind of how he invests, some of his philosophies, some of his techniques and tricks. And then we're going to get a startup to kind of pitch their company. And Arjun's going to talk us through how he's going to analyze it, make it a bit engaging and talk to you guys about it. But yeah, with that note, I'm going to pass it to Arjun to talk a bit about it. Yeah, thank you.
Great. Hey, thank you so much for the opportunity. I mean, there's a lot of you in the room, and I want to make sure I'm not killing too much productivity for students here. So I'll keep it brief. I don't know if you know much about Floodgate. I'm happy to give you a quick overview on who we are, and what we do. But I'd love for this to be interactive. I don't want to kind of be speaking to you guys. I can ramble on for hours. So I just want to make sure that you guys are getting value. So after I just give you a brief overview of the firm, maybe we can go around the room and see what questions you have, and I'll make sure that over the course of the discussion, I try to kind of cover those and answer some of those questions. And if they aren't, I'm happy to talk about how we tend to look at companies, history of the firm, backgrounds of the partners, why VC, things like that. So you can, I'm happy to take it in absolutely any direction. This is your time. So please let me know. At Floodgate, we are a seed stage venture capital firm, right? So anything that's pre-product market fit. In this market, lines of blurring, you're not quite sure what seed is, what's pre-seed, what's seed extension, what's post-seed, what's Series A, what's A1. There's a lot of monikers out there. Anything that's pre-product market fit, we consider to be seed. The firm's been around for a little over 15 years at this point. We are 4 partners at the firm. 3 of us, Ann and Mike, the 2 founders, and myself, write first checks in the companies. And our 4th partner, Iris, she owns all our follow-on checks. The 3 of us who write first checks in, we're all technical. We've all been founders before. We are happy to lead. We work as a team, and that's not just kind of teamwork makes the dream work, so to speak. In our case, our economics don't change on an investment basis. So entrepreneurs get access to the entire team. We all have basically the same incentives to help out every company. So you don't have, we try to minimize the politics that shows up as folks get more territorial, as the firms grow. So in this case, it's not like this is Mike's deal or this is Arjun's deal or what have you. Everybody tries to, form that pit crew to help out the entrepreneur. We're happy to lead rounds. What does leading the round mean? It means you set the terms for the round, you set the valuation, you work with the entrepreneur to figure out what the size of the round ought to be. Usually they have a sense of how much they need. And we're happy to lead rounds. We're not necessarily tag-along investors where we say, look, go find the lead, we'll write a small check in. We consider ourselves to be conviction investors. We're investing out of our 7th fund. And the last, this fund as well as the previous one is a little over 130 million, 140 million in this case. And the previous ones were smaller, but the strategy stayed the same. So that's kind of us in a nutshell. What burning questions about VC do you guys have? Which direction do you want me to take this?
How important is it for an investor to be technical or to have a technical
Okay,
background?
so backgrounds of investors. Okay, that's one. Any other areas you guys want me to dig in?
So something interesting I thought you said, I kind of read the question, but this sounds better. You mentioned something about minimizing politics. And that's something I've actually never heard a VC talk about. Describing,
okay.
Their firm. Can you go a little more into that?
Okay. So just firm dynamics and, incentive design and stuff like that, and why it tends to get, why are there some firms that just cease to exist and other firms, Sequoia and Benchmark just handle generational transfer extremely well. Okay, I'll cover that. Yes.
How did you make the transition from being a founder to wanting to go into VC?
Okay.
How did the logistics of that work out?
Okay, so a little bit more background, but then what does day in the life look like as an operator investor? Okay, yes.
What industries and technologies are most interesting
Okay,
to you right
I'm
now?
gonna have to start writing. So let's see, there's background. There's investment. There's I'm sorry, there was areas of interest.
Yeah, areas of interest.
Okay. Any others? Yes.
What do you search for in LinkedIn? And what are some of the significant indicators for you in finding those unicorns or
Sure.
founder investors?
Sure. That's good. Somebody's been checking on the
I made my
website.
research.
That's great. That's great. Okay. That's a little bit more investment criteria. Okay. Awesome, sir.
I guess investing in deep tech companies who have promising technology, but you're not sure if the grounds are out yet.
Okay.
Making money.
So a little bit more, let's see, areas of interest, deep tech as we dig into that. Okay. Sir.
I just more generally your sourcing strategy.
Yep.
Scouts,
Okay.
also do referrals.
Yep. Okay.
Your thoughts on social ventures and what makes a successful social venture?
Okay. It's more like double bottom line investing.
What is double bottom line?
Okay. It's not just all about the single bottom line, which is not just all about the profits, but there's societal benefit. There's other reasons that have a positive externality. Okay, fair enough. Sorry.
When your companies begin to attain product market fit, how do you start scaling them to try and get some sense like a network?
Okay, so let's see, scaling companies. Okay. Okay. Yeah.
This might already fit under investment politics, but sort of what makes a VC firm successful?
Yeah. Other than great returns. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Could you give some specifics as to how you basically work with the founders to
Okay. Yep.
advise them and stuff?
So that's more like portfolio support.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, sir.
If you knew you were going to end up in VC, would you suggest starting an operator as an investor?
Okay, so like career path to VC. Okay. Okay.
soft and technical skills you look for in the founding team?
So that was investment criteria. Soft skills. Okay. Okay.
Correct me if I'm wrong, you said that we invest in the first round of investment strategies.
Oh, we write the first check-in.
Right,
So,
first check,
yep.
and then one person that's the second check.
Correct.
Correct.
Or this, yeah, I can explain that. And we're fairly unique on that side.
Great, and then can you just tell us a little more about like the different systems that you guys go through to make decisions about first, second, how to
Sure.
work?
Sure. Yep. Okay. So that's more, okay. That's more decision making, right? Okay. All right, last one.
How do you navigate a disagreement between partners over a company that you really believe in?
Yep, fair enough. Okay, so that's kind of this one, right? Disagreements. And this is for first. Okay. Okay, this so a lot of topics to cover. I'll try to move through them. Okay, so let's, why don't we start with, and you guys understand how VC works, what the incentives are, limited partners, general partners, caddy structure, fee structure, you guys get all that, right? So, okay. So the reason where, so I'll take number 2 first, right? So the reason where politics tends to come in is generally partnerships are by definition, there are multiple people involved. Not always are the stakes the same. So sometimes you have, different people with different ownership. And then let's say somebody has a hot hand, right? I'm not casting aspersions on any of these guys, but let's say all of A16Z was one firm and Chris Dixon is now Midas list number 1, right? So Chris Dixon's looking at it, and if he's sharing his economics with other people in the firm, he's like, dude, I'm carrying all the weight. These guys are spending all the money. There's all the profits that come in from his investments. A portion of that is shared. So that's where it starts to basically get, things start to get kind of hot under the collar, right? There's a set of people who are like, I've done all the work. I've brought in all the good deals. Why do I not get the lion's share of the economics? And, other people are sharing the tribe's provisions, if you may. But they're not kind of chewing the leather as much as I am. So usually that starts to kind of add issues. Or you've got senior partners who are no longer active. They're sitting on a whole bunch of company boards. Those companies have been marked up already. They're not doing net new investments. They're missing out on big waves. But because of seniority, they just, they have a lion's share of the carry or some portion of the carry structure. And the junior folks are antsy. And they're like, look, this is just not kind of making sense. And that's usually the source of disagreements. So how do they manifest themselves? One is partners themselves. Yeah, I mean, it can be a pretty lucrative cash flow business, even just based on the management fee. So oftentimes there's an incentive to just go and raise larger and larger funds. So as a portion of that, people who are on payroll are getting paid well, but the work and the output of that is different. And it takes a while before you can judge the performance of somebody. Like in our case, at the pre-seed and seed stage, it can be a decade before you realize any of the investments, right? So it's kind of, there's that old joke where, this guy finds a snail on his doorstep, he tosses the snail across the street. 2 years later, he gets a knock on the door, and it's the snail, and the snail's like, what's up, man? Why do you throw me across the street? Right? So it just takes a while before these things kind of mature. So it can cause kind of friction. The other way it starts to show up is a question you were asking on how decisions get made. So sometimes if you've got, let's say, some firms have a voting structure. So you need to get a majority vote or you need to get a unanimous vote. Partners will be like, look, you didn't vote for my previous company. I'm just going to shoot down your company. So you start kind of having these team dynamic issues because at the end of the day, look, there's a bunch of type A people that you're trying to get to work together as a team. It tends to be a boutique business. There are not that many, the firms are not that massive. Outside of A16Z, most of the others are small. So, there's always room for politics. So the way you kind of try to minimize that is taking a page from the benchmark model. So what does benchmark do? Everybody's equal as a partner. That way, when somebody comes in, you're like, look, either we all believe we're a team or we're not, right? There's no I in team. So everybody works and the economics are split evenly. So everybody holds each other accountable. Now, that's fine if you're a small firm. If you have, 20 partners and you're geographically separated, it just becomes difficult on that side. So, politics starts to show up there. The other place where people tend to mess up is, or firms tend to mess up, is they don't do generational transfer well. So again, you're Chris Dixon, you did the deal in Coinbase. Coinbase netted Andreessen at its peak close to 15 billion to Andreessen. So that is what we call a return the firm exit. So they have 15 billion assets under management, one deal returned that off, right? So Chris Dixon might decide, hey, I turned 50, it's time to ride off into the sunset. Now, if the firm didn't do a good job at hiring junior people and he pieces out, you're kind of stuck, right? And the firm basically ceases to exist. Now, some people care, some people don't. And if you look at some of the real franchises that were out there, you look at Greylock, it actually started up in Boston. They didn't handle generational transfer necessarily as well there. And a lot of the key partners who were here then reset Greylock in the Bay Area. And now Greylock's a very, very storied firm, but the origins of that were in another region. But they managed to actually get somebody to move out here, and they got the California operations going. But a lot of the firms, unfortunately, just don't do that. And then, the mighty start to fall, and, so things like that are where politics tend to come in. So we try to minimize it both in the way our incentives are set up, but then also in the way we make decisions. So somebody asked, I can't remember who, on how do you guys decide which company you want to invest in? And so in our case, we don't need consensus to get a deal done. We don't have a voting system. You don't have majority wins. You don't need unanimity, none of that. Somebody's got to pound the table for the deal. So somebody's got to basically take their badge out and be like, this is my investment. I believe in this company and I will do whatever it takes to make them successful. And that's all you need. So everybody else could vote no, and you can still get the deal done. Or everybody could vote yes, but they're like, it's a good company, but I'm not going to do it. Somebody else wants to take it. That deal doesn't get done. So we try to have that basically then get tied into accountability and ownership, which are just in general operating wise good, good best practices. But somebody on our end has to pound the table. So that's how we tend to kind of make decisions on that side. So the other thing that VC at the end of the day, it's a business of picking. No matter what everybody else says, all the other stuff, you pick well, you're a genius. You do all the other things well, and you mess up picking, and you're a fool. Right? It will not matter. There are, at the end of the day, especially in high tech, right? There are very, very few companies that matter. Now, going in for us, most of our successful companies were actually pivots, right? So we were first investors in a company called Odeo. How many of you guys have heard of Odeo? Okay, so Odeo was started by the gentleman Ev, who had sold his previous business to Google. So Ev comes out with a podcasting company, and he's like, "Hey, I want to do podcasts." Launches the podcasting company. Mike and our team invests in Odeo, and literally a few weeks later, Apple announces podcasting for free in iTunes. Mike's like, "Oh shit, where's this going to go?" And the company, Ev is trying and slowly starts kind of winding down. And because he had made some money selling his previous company, Blogger, to Google, he goes to all the investors and he says, "Look, I'm going to just return the money. I don't think this is working out." And Mike was like, "Look, I think you're a smart guy. I invested in you. What are you doing next?" He's like, "Well, we got this thing on the side. We're calling it voicemail. We're not sure if we should call it voicemail 2.0 or TWTTR." So Mike's like, "Okay, this Twitter thing sounds kind of interesting. What does it do?" And Ev is like, "Well, you tell it what you're doing in 140 characters or less." And Mike's like, "Okay, great. And then what?" Like, "That's it." He's like, "Okay, and how are you going to make money?" He said, "I have no idea." And he said, "Why is this a product, much less a company or a business?" And Ev's insight was what was profound, right? So Ev said when he launched Blogger, he got 1 million people to blog, made it very easy for you to kind of publish your thoughts. And, Google ended up finding value in that. He went and tried to launch a podcasting company, and he's like, "It's pretty involved to get a podcast launched. But you got to kind of record, you got to upload sound files, you got to set up RSS feeds. It's just, it's cumbersome." Said that didn't work out. He's going the other way. He said, I'm going to make it super easy for people to just publish what they're thinking. If I can get to 10 million people, I'll figure it out. Mike was like, if you can change your name and add in the vowels, I think it'll make a big difference. We're in, right? And that basically, that investment was, I think, a 500 bagger for us, right? So it's crazy. Nobody knew it going in. Most people took their money back, and we called it a forward fumble, right? For those of you who watch football. Another company that we invested in was Justin.tv, right? So we invest in Justin.tv. Justin Khan walks into the pitch meeting. He's like, do you mind if I live stream my meeting? Mike's like, how exciting is your life? You know, who wants to see this stuff? And he walked into the coffee shop with a little eyesight camera clipped on his baseball hat and wires going in his backpack. And Mike was like, this guy looked like a terrorist, right? Shaky. So, but he comes in and, he's like, I'm going to live stream my life. And Mike was like, well, how exciting is your life? You know, who gives a shit? But he's like, the insight that he had was pretty profound, which is being able to do live streaming on low bandwidth internet connections is a technically challenging problem. So Mike was like, we'll invest. It was, I think, done at a $3 million post-money valuation or something like that. Justin.tv doesn't end up working out. They split into two companies. One was SocialCam, bless you, that exited for about 75 million. And everybody's like, awesome. You know, this ended up working out great. The other company that they split into became Twitch, right? And Twitch sells for close to $1 billion, you know, and ends up being a great outcome. Right. The other company that this happened at was a company called Zimride that we had invested in. The founders of Zimride, one of them had actually worked for the Department of Transportation. How many of you guys are from LA, by the way? Anybody from LA? Okay, so you're familiar with traffic in LA, right? So these guys had done a study which said that the utilization of a car in LA is 1.1. So 1.1 people per car. If you can bump that up to 1.3, there's no traffic in LA, right? And LA is notorious for traffic. So they were like, you got to get this ride sharing thing going. Zimride was initially selling software to college campuses and office complexes to help them do ride sharing more effectively. They said, screw that, that's really not working out. We think ride sharing for consumers is where the action is. They launch Lyft, right? That becomes Lyft, and that basically takes off. Now, the discussion at the board meeting was, is Uber going to react? Because Uber was just minting money in the black car business. They weren't in the ride sharing business at that point. And they thought Travis is just not gonna react. And to his credit, he saw this and understood that this is an existential threat to his company. The reacts comes on it. So anyway, I'll stop my ramble. There's enough examples where if you bet on what the company is or what it looks like, at least at the seed stage, you're oftentimes going to miss out on something super profound. So what we try to seek for is, in addition to the team, who are the people who are going to make it happen, is what are the insights that the founder has, and what are those, if they form the foundations of the first principles upon which you're going to build this business, what are they? Are those insights truly profound? Are they going to be sustaining? Does this give the entrepreneur some kind of proprietary power, right? Is there some hard math, some solid IP? So to kind of the deep tech question, is there something kind of super complex and technically challenging for them to build? And do they understand how do they take this to market? If there's a network effect, even better, right? But not all businesses have network effects, but we seek them out because that is a form of defensibility. We call that a form of proprietary power in the company. So that's, there's some of the ways in which we tend to do this. So if you do your job well to pick, the outcomes are basically driven by the power law. So your most successful investment, if you look at, let's say Y Combinator, right? And the 3,000 plus startups they've got, the top 2 or 3 companies, right? Coinbase, Stripe, Airbnb are worth more than all the others combined. So if you were an investor and you bought a basket of all the YC companies and you missed out on the top 5, you probably didn't do as well as the guy who managed to get one check in the early days into one of the successful companies, right? So it is a very, very, very hits-driven business. So you have to get good at picking. And unfortunately, at our stage, a lot of the businesses just change. Right? We're investors in Chegg. They start out as a classifieds for college students. So all of these, they tend to morph, and you try to glom on to what's that insight. If you can get that piece right. So now the question is, moving on to let's say deal flow and sources. That is the name of the game, right? VCs live and die by deal flow. At the seed stage, our universe is basically every human being out there who wants to do a startup, right? If once you're at, let's say you're a later stage investor, if you are SoftBank, right? Your Nagaraj or Priya at SoftBank, over there, for them, their universe is the companies that have raised a Series A. So that universe is relatively well defined because it's from that group that somebody's going to graduate and they will go in there and invest with those folks. Or if you're a later stage investor, if you're Iconic or you're, Tiger used to be there, now they're up and down the investment chain. Or if you're Insight or some other folks, you will just wait and you see, okay, what are the smart and good VCs doing at the A? What are the companies that Sequoia is investing in, or Benchmark or Andreessen, and we'll then follow into those companies. But now what's happening, because the hits are so outsized, Jim Getz at Sequoia did this well, where he's like, once he found and realized WhatsApp's going to be a thing, he's not letting anybody else in. He's like, whatever money you need, I will give you. And they will set up the growth vehicles and they do all that kind of work, and Jim Getz is now retired, right? And Jim Getz was a very, very successful B2B investor, but his biggest hit was on the B2C side, right? You just never know with these things. So you try to be open to that. And then where do these deals come from? If you're early stage, referrals are a great source. We try to, there's a couple of kinds, right? There's people who never, let alone never having run a business before, they've never worked before. So I would probably put most of you guys in that mix. So if there's first-time entrepreneurs, and then there's seasoned entrepreneurs, right? People who've had exits before, who've been successful, or who've been operators at companies. And there's just different kind of rubrics and frameworks that we use there. Is there domain insight that they have in a particular domain? Is the go-to-market route well understood? So you try to figure out, you try as best you can to invest like you're lazy. And the way I've been told, and it was put much more succinctly by another investor, when you're picking a company, it's like the best investments to make are the ones where you write the check, you show up at the board meeting, you applaud, and you leave, right? The entrepreneurs have everything figured out and the business is up and to the right. There's nothing to do, and you just wait for your check to cash. Now, unfortunately, that rarely happens, but you try to figure out, like, what is it that these entrepreneurs will need, and is that something value add wise that you can provide? There's a lot of other investors who don't lead rounds, who will be the tuck-in check or the angel check along the side, and they're truly looking at the entrepreneur as a call option or a lottery ticket. But in our case, if we find an entrepreneur where this is their life's work, that's the kind that we try to get in front of. And those usually come through referrals, through folks like yourself saying, hey, have you spoken to Joe or Mary in our class? He or she's the smartest person I've ever met. And we're like, fast track that meeting and any way in which we can be helpful, right? But in other cases, if you get a cold email coming in, over the transom, it's just hard to know. And then you start to question, you're like, okay, could this founder not find absolutely anybody to make an introduction or to vouch for him or her? So the worst possible way is to just cold email somebody with a pitch deck. There's just way too much noise in the market, and it's just impossible to kind of filter through those. All right, so which ones have we covered? Okay, so deal flow sources, investment politics, decision-making criteria. And we talked a little bit about this, but I'll talk about first checks versus follow-ups, right? So in our case, part of the politics also comes in when you are, let's say I write a check into 5 companies over the course of a year. You're kind of in the foxhole with the entrepreneurs, you see how they're trying, and now it comes time for the next round. I've spent a disproportionate amount of time with the companies I've been more intimately involved in than ones that are not an area of expertise of mine or something else. And then when it comes time where this company is raising more money, I'm like, hey, I think these guys are doing a good job. Let's put in more money into them. But then at the same time, Anne's company is doing well, or she's closer to them. Mike's company is doing well. So it becomes difficult to have a band portfolio view. We ran the numbers on our side. And if we had been more aggressive and we focused our follow-on money, so that's the check after your first check, let's say X quarters in, the company's raising the next round, should you participate or not? And if so, how much? If you do a good job at that, that can materially drive returns for the firm. So putting more, not putting good money into your mediocre or bad companies, but putting good money into the great companies. That's basically our follow-on investor, lead follow-on investor's job. So she looks across the portfolio and she's like, is this company in the top third? And does this have a shot to be one of the top 3 companies in our fund? There's also the timing issue, because the company you invest in first, you in theory at least have the most data on. versus the company you just wrote a check in. So how do you manage the reserves? How do you figure out if by the time this company ends up being the Twitter and the fund, and you just don't have any money left, what are you going to do? Right. So it's her job to kind of keep track of the portfolio and figure out how to allocate the reserves. And the other decision you make is how much of your fund goes into reserves. In some cases, they do 50-50. In our cases, we do 70-30, 70% in the first checks, 30% in the follow. Because we feel that if this is a business of picking. If you pick well, the 70% that goes in there gives Iris a great shot at finding hopefully awesome companies to double down into. So that's this. Portfolio support. This is where different companies have different needs. Unlike a lot of other firms, we don't have. Some firms will invest in a platform. They'll be like, hey, I'll have an in-house recruiter. I'll have an in-house marketing person. I'll provide community support. I'll do all this work. What we've come to observe, the good entrepreneurs figure that stuff out, right? They know they've got a good network of who they're going to hire. They have an extremely high bar for talent. They are, they're kind of pissed off for greatness, if you may, right? They're not willing to compromise on a lot of stuff. And if we have somebody in-house who's doing an okay job, they will, by definition, if you are really high quality, you will run your own firm or you will be a high quality headhunter, for example, right? So if we want to hire the best possible chief marketing officer or, a chief revenue officer for a company that's really starting to scale, maybe our in-house person may have somebody, but chances are that the, Schweitler or the Cole Group or whoever who do this all day, every day, that's what they're going to be world-class at. So we're like, pay them their money, and it's expensive these days. It's over $100 grand in retainer just to get one of those firms to kick off a search for you. Pay them, they will find you talent that will materially move the needle. So we believe in best of breed. You've got a set of relationships with a set of people that we'll then bring to bear when the time is right. Okay. But outside of that, it's helping the entrepreneurs figure out, are they going to end up at local maxima? I funded a company recently that was actually by an ACES guy, probably before your time anyway, Adi Jain, who's started a company called Allopay, right? It's just early days for them. And we meet twice a week. And him and his co-founder, who's technical, and we spend the time trying to figure out, are they glomming on to some insight that could be pretty interesting? And a lot of that is just being a sounding board. We have breadth, the entrepreneurs have depth. So we try to kind of bring that to bear as best we can. And then, we've got our own biases and we have our own understanding of the markets. And that kind of, leads me to background of people, as well as, there's one more. Basically, background, right, operator and background. So on this side, there are many, many ways that people get into VC. There are a lot of career VCs, probably in my opinion, one of the best was Jim Breyer. Jim Breyer is the guy who everybody thought he was nuts when he invested in Facebook at $100 million valuation. And they're like, this company's not worth more than 75 million. What are you doing at 100 million? And he personally put in a check into the company that ended up yielding him personally $1 billion off of that one investment. So he's a pretty smart guy, career VC. Peter Fenton over at Benchmark, career VC, worked at Bain for a couple of years. John Doerr at Kleiner, career VC, carried a bag at Intel for a little bit. Fred Wilson at USB, career VC. On the other side, you've got the recent folks, right? Most of the, up until I think Connie or Angela Strange, pretty much everybody else prior to that was an entrepreneur themselves. Mike Moritz at Sequoia was a journalist. Bill Gurley at Benchmark was a research analyst. Right, so there's just different paths that you have and you take to kind of get there, and everybody comes with their set of biases. They bring to bear. Operators, the challenge that you have is every situation looks, you try to relate to it as best you can. In my case, I was like, hey, if as a former entrepreneur, you do X, Y, Z, I can see how you get 2 or 3 customers, and what's the problem? Let's kind of rock and roll. And the problem is that might end up being local maxima. You might not be one of the 10 companies that year that matter. So you have to be open-minded about what decisions you make and what biases you bring to the table. So as a former operator, also you try to jump into fixed mode as opposed to this is a lack of product market fit. You need to go back to the drawing board, and maybe this one insight that you might have missed is actually the investable insight. So, there's things you have to watch out for, and just knowing what your biases might be. There's a temptation to grab the wheel, I wouldn't do this if I was in the entrepreneur's shoes, based on my operating experience. I think this was put very well to me where, by this one gentleman, where he said it's kind of like, your glasses, right? I mean, I can see clearly through them. If I give them to you, I'm like, why can you see clearly through them? Right. So it doesn't work for everybody. Your background is not necessarily relevant for everybody. Cool. All right.
I just had a really quick question. I missed the name of the person that worked at Fire.
Oh, John Doerr.
John Doerr.
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
So John Doerr he's now retired, but
Yeah.
or kind of emeritus or whatever at the firm, but he's one of the core guys.
Thank you.
You bet. You bet.
Cool, thanks so much. That was actually
Sure.
really interesting. We're going to introduce energy startup Scope Zero. This one's that startup. We'll give 10 minutes.
Perfect. Well, and feel free to interrupt.
Oh,
So
sounds good.
we can structure this however is best.
Sure.
And if you have any lingering questions, just write them down and make sure to send them into the Slack or to me and Melanie. We will send them over at the end of the session as well.
Yeah, and I can hang out for 2 minutes after the call.
Awesome.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Okay. So I'm Lizzie. I graduated with my master's in sustainable design and construction here last June. And this is my first time pitching in person, so I appreciate that opportunity. Okay.
You're good with the live stream and the record.
Sure. Is it just to the
students?
Yeah, perfect. Great. Okay. I don't know how long this normally takes. I can start just with a little bit of background of myself and my co-founder. So our company is called Scope Zero.
Was really try dragging like your deck onto the voice?
I feel like it should be. So I was in presentation mode. Yeah, it should be popping up, I believe.
So, Lizzie, no pressure, but this is unfortunately what happened to us when we had this company coming to pitch where for 250 grand, we would have had 10% of the company. That company ended up being Airbnb. And what happened was Brian Chesky came in the pitch and he was going to give a demo, and the site went down. And he was kind of trying to explain what the site did, and could have, should have.
I could have just talked my way through it, but I think so. Yeah, no, I'm good. Okay, so our company is called Scope Zero. So just a brief overview. We have created a fintech platform that facilitates a new employee benefit that we've created. And we're calling this employee benefit a carbon savings account, or CSA. So the CSA makes it a financial no-brainer to decarbonize the residential sector. So just a brief background on myself and my co-founder, Caitlin. So like I said, we met in Stanford's Sustainable Design and Construction Master's Program, so we really focus on energy efficient building design. We both worked for several years before coming back to Stanford. So I have a background in mechanical engineering, and my most recent position before Stanford was at a company called Amoresco. So I was designing cost-effective energy and water efficiency upgrades for military-based housing, so specifically in the residential sector, okay? And then Caitlin worked at a fintech startup called Guideline, and Guideline is it's a 401k company, which is another employee benefit. So we kind of combined our backgrounds to create Scope Zero. So we are very early stage. We really started working on this idea, and we really started to pick up momentum in about October. Since October, we've been working with our team of advisors, Ashby, Eric, and Dave, to really develop our go-to-market strategy and our business strategy. And then we are working with another Stanford student, Krishna, who's our full stack engineer. Our product is a platform that facilitates the benefit. I'll get into that a little bit. Okay, so just a little bit of background. In 2019, the residential energy consumption was responsible for 20% of total carbon emissions in the US. But actually, the average US home could reduce their energy consumption by about 40% if they simply upgraded to the latest efficient tech that already exists. But most homes don't do that, and there are two primary reasons. One is that the logistics are a headache, and two is that the financial incentives are either inadequate or non-existent. So from the logistical side, it really comes from this fragmented nature of the residential space in the US. So the US has 130 million homes, and each of them have unique needs and are used uniquely. And then because there are so many options for home technology and then for contractors that install that home tech, the amount of time needed to research the proper technology for your home is a burden that discourages optimal and timely upgrades throughout your home. So on top of all of this, capital costs of many home upgrades are expensive. So if the average household did upgrade to the most efficient tech that exists on the marketplace, the payback time would be about 24 years. So all of these factors make it difficult to facilitate widespread residential upgrades. But we've created a solution that reduces these logistical headaches and creates these financial incentives to make home upgrades. It really just makes it a financial no-brainer. So we're doing that through a new employee benefit that we're calling a carbon savings account. So I'll explain how the CSA would work. So if you guys are familiar with health savings accounts or 401ks, some of the framework was a bit inspired from that. So the employee and the employer would both contribute to the carbon savings account. In between purchases, the employee can invest that money in the marketplace, ideally in sustainable fund options, if they want it to grow. But if they take the money out, the money has to be spent on eligible home technology upgrades that reduce your utility bills and therefore your carbon footprint. So most of our eligible upgrades include home technology or home efficient upgrades, so like refrigerators or heating or cooling systems or smart thermostats, but we're also including renewable energy options like solar and storage and clean transportation options like electric vehicles. So we're also building out this partner vendor network. So in return for the customers that are now coming to these vendors through the CSA, the partner vendors actually pass back a referral or bulk discount to the employee. So just by taking advantage of a modest employer match and a modest partner vendor discount, the employee can now achieve an ROI on their utility bill savings that is attractive and competitive compared to other marketplace investments. And you know you're going to have to spend money on your utility bills, so why not invest it in your home with a CSA? So from the employee's perspective, like I just mentioned, we now can achieve this attractive ROI through the employer match and the partner vendor discounts. And then to ease the logistical burdens of home upgrades, our platform will provide customized upgrade recommendations to each employee, and our marketplace ecosystem connects employees to vendors that provide CSA eligible upgrades. So by using the employer as a customer acquisition channel, we streamline the process of decarbonizing the residential sector because we aggregate local vendor options and provide these financial discounts for employees that are too good to pass up. So why would an employer offer this benefit? So the carbon savings account lies at the intersection of an employee benefit and a corporate sustainability strategy. So from the employer's perspective, this provides a few different value propositions. So one is this employee attraction and retention piece. Two include sustainability reporting, and then three, carbon credits. So I'll dig into each of these a little bit. So the CSA aligns nicely with increasing interest in sustainability from both corporations and individuals. And then our platform will actually measure CSA-enabled carbon reductions over time. So if I'm an employee and I purchase a new heating system, the platform will see how my utility consumption decreases over time and therefore my carbon footprint. So we can aggregate this data or this performance for all of the employees at a company and spit it out into a corporate social responsibility or a sustainability reports for companies that can then influence their ESG rating. And we can also get these carbon reductions approved by carbon credit agencies. And so carbon credits hold financial value. So we can pass these carbon credits back to the employer. So now the employer also has a financial incentive to offer this carbon savings account. Okay, jumping into revenue model a little bit. Our revenue model has 4 different streams. I'm not going to get into the specifics here, but I will just note that we have ways to achieve revenue through each of the users of the platform, and then also a little bit within this carbon space. And many of these are industry standards with other employee benefits, but we've also added a bit of creativity there as well. With our financial model, we've been able to put together an estimate of an average annual recurring revenue per enrolled employee per year. So if I were to take that value and transition into the market size just within the US, I would take that value and multiply it by the number of employees in the United States. And there are 106 full-time employees that work at companies of 10 or more people. So that would put us at a total addressable market of X billion. Looking at a serviceable addressable market, this is real. Our revenue is really driven by employee adoption and participation. So the company would need to offer this benefit in the first place, right? So we use retirement benefits as a proxy, and about 70% of US employees are offered retirement benefits. So we would basically just take our TAM, multiply it by 0.7, and that's our SAM. But looking at this through an environmental lens, which is really important to us, if our SAM reduced their carbon emissions by just 30%, which, as I mentioned earlier, is very easily achievable just through standard efficiency upgrades, that would be equivalent to removing 50 million cars from the road. Okay, transitioning into competition a little bit. We look at 4 main categories. So we look at the home tech and transportation financing, we look at employee attraction and retention, a home technology marketplace, and then this recommendations and reporting piece. So the green benefits space is a nascent market. There are a few small competitors in the market. They're both new, small companies. They don't have a broad presence, and they offer green benefits that are really targeted at an employee base that already cares about their carbon footprint. We really lean into this financial piece from the employee's perspective, which significantly broadens our user base. We also have indirect competitors like traditional home improvement retailers, but we provide a more customized marketplace. I mean, we ultimately plan to partner with a Lowe's or a Home Depot as partner vendors as opposed to competitors. Similarly, we plan to collaborate with utility companies so that employees can take advantage of existing rebates and tax credits to even further lower their cost of home upgrades. And then lastly, we compete with other voluntary benefits that a company might offer. But as I mentioned, we lie at the intersection of an employee benefit and a corporate sustainability strategy. So we actually don't have to fully rely on HR's budget. We can tap it into the sustainability budget as well. And the CSA offers financial returns through carbon credits to the employer. So that gives us an edge over other voluntary benefits. Just looking at the trends of our financial projections over the next 5 years, this shows expenses, revenue, and gross margin. I should note that these revenue numbers conservatively assume that all companies operate on a calendar year benefit cycle. So that means that any sales efforts performed between January and December of a given year won't be realized in profit until January of the following year. Talking a little bit about traction, as I mentioned, we're an early stage startup. We received a non-dilutive grant from Stanford, which has been funding our MVP development, which we kicked off in January. We've also been engaging with Sustained Cert, so that's a carbon credit agency, so that we can develop proper and verified methodologies for the carbon credit piece. And recently we have signed with a lead investor firm. So we're pretty close to closing out this pre-seed round. And then this is a breakdown of how we intend to spend our pre-seed funding. We are continuing to build out our engineering and tech team to ultimately complete the MVP and roll it out in a beta trial that we're going to kick off this July with a handful of companies, so we can do some continuous real-time improvement of the product before rolling it out to larger companies in 2023. And then in parallel to these engineering efforts, really finalizing this carbon offset program. So that's everything for the main deck. I really appreciate it, and I'm excited to hear your questions.
This sounds great. Congratulations. This is, there's obviously a very high degree of authenticity here, right? This is clearly you and your co-founder's life's work. I'm curious on, what, if you think about this from like a defensibility perspective, what do you feel are the hard problems you will have to solve? And doesn't have to be solved now, but how are you thinking about what that looks like?
Absolutely. So there are a few different aspects that I'd like to bring up here. So one, we are the first company to create this carbon savings account. So just the advantage of first to market can really be helpful to us, but we have to move fast. We have to create a strong brand and get this trust by larger employers, particularly, that really lead this employee benefit space, so that we can then easily roll out to other employers as well. It's kind of a flywheel effect in a way. As soon as a Nike starts to offer a CSA, oh, well, now Adidas has to as well to keep up with a competitive benefits package, right? From the back end of our platform, there are two segments the way that I see the platform. So there's the fintech side. So that keeps track of all of the financial purchases. And we really have to make sure that that's secure and safe and accurate. But then there's also this measurement side that's really entrenched in utility data. So right now, there's an organization called the Green Button Initiative. And basically, it means that let's say I live in an apartment or a house and I pay the electricity bill every month. If my home is within a Green Button zip code, I can go to Green Button Initiative, click a button, and my utility now has to give my data to any third party. And so that currently exists, or half of US homes have access to that right now, which is great for us because then we can make we're building out our database to make this carbon reduction measurement really, really accurate. And so I think having a really solid foundation in this carbon reporting piece of things will be huge for us going forward, because we can really, it's not just gaining a foothold as an employee benefit, but it's also getting that first step on getting these carbon reductions approved as carbon credits to bring that financial incentive in for the employer.
Yeah, and I encourage you to think, what would success look like at the end of this round before you got, and I'm sure you thought of this, before you get to your next round of financing, right? So people will, I'm guessing folks will probably, it's a bummer that you already have your lead investor spoken for, but let's say, you were looking for a seed round next or a Series A, folks would want to see, okay, meaningful traction wise, like how is this business on a trajectory where you can ideally triple every year for the foreseeable future if the yardstick that you're going to use to measure success is going to be revenue. So if you're saying that my business ought to be measured based on revenue, what does that end up looking like for you guys? And towards that end, rather than a top down, which all markets tend to look big as you look at them top down, is what's your bottoms up go to market and what does that build look like? So in this case, it would be, okay, do you include renters or not? Are renters kind of on the hook? How many of them will be renters? If you live in an apartment, are you in a position to kind of make meaningful decisions there? Or is this primarily, single family home owners out there? Or are you selling to the apartment complex folks? That's a different go-to-market motion. That's a different sales org, different product marketing. So like which market segment are you going to tackle first? And usually what we've seen is most successful businesses will make 80+% of their revenue one way initially. So an example of that is, at the extremes, Amazon. So Amazon went public in '97 and they were only selling books, right? After that, then they ran a very measured study for revenue stream number 2, in their case, music and CDs, and today it's the everything store, right? So as you're going, what's using your seed round or your pre-seed round to figure out, which value proposition is resonating for which customer. With most of the other savings accounts, there's a tax benefit that directly hits the pocketbook. And what we've seen with something even like a 401k is even when there's an employer match, a lot of times those go unserviced, right? People just need the cash. So what does this end up looking like? What are the other incentives? So what are the experiments you will run? So when you go to the next round, you're like, look at all these, look at the idea maze that I've navigated, and a newcomer or a new entrant into this space will have to figure all this stuff out from the outside, right? But that's kind of the learning that you want to show, and hopefully that then unlocks some kind of predictable, repeatable motion on your side. The other thing to think through is avoiding to some degree the comparison trap, right? You have your competition slide and the check boxes. It tends to get very expensive if people feel like you are jumping into a water where there already are. Now, none of those names resonated with or were recognizable by me, but I'm not a refined investor in this space. But you want to have ideally a situation where there is some non-consensus insight, which if that ends up being right, the outcome can be asymmetric. So in this case, if you're going to be better than those folks, then it's like, okay, that's more of an execution-based play, and it tends to be operationally intensive and may not be the hockey stick upside. So really thinking through what's the insight that those people will never have, and what is that you're hanging your business off of? So is it there's a new kind of employee benefit that other people won't get, and there's something defensible you build around that? It sounds like there's a big branding component, but what aspect is that? And then you're forcing the customer to make a choice and not have a comparison, which they'll tend to go for lowest cost or what have you on that end. So there's just nuances there that potentially might be worth considering. But again, that talk is cheap on my side, right? I'm not encumbered by facts. So some food for thought. But look, it sounds like you guys are on your way, which is great. And, I mean, having read How to Avoid a Climate Disaster and all the other side, it's daunting, and we need more stuff like this. So kudos to you guys.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much for coming. Yeah, do you have any last words or anything you want to say?
Yeah, I really appreciate the time. This was cool to finally do this in person, and I'm also happy to answer any questions or stay after and chat. So thank you.
Oh yes. Before I forget, Floodgate is running a program. There's a deadline. Thank you. There's a deadline this Friday. It's a program called Outliers, and the website's outliers.build. It's mainly for people who are interested in building something interesting in the Web3 world. So we have a set of we are co-hosting it with Alok Srivastava. He's a PhD from Stanford who runs Standard Crypto. Guests include folks like Raj Gokul, the founder of Solana. There's a set of other guest lecturers who are coming in and really teaching people, teaching builders about Web3. And there's no fee or anything associated with that. But the goal is that at some point you would build something that will hopefully end up being an interesting Web3 company. This is the second year we're running this. Last year was not necessarily targeted at Web3, but most of the teams ended up gravitating towards there. So this year we're like, hey, let's kind of make that explicit. So in case you guys are interested, the website's outliers.build. There's a bunch of teams that have already, and a bunch of students or individuals have already applied. It's only targeting students from a set of different schools, Stanford being one of them. So if it's of interest, please submit that. The last info session was unfortunately yesterday, but there may be some information online, video-wise, if you may. But otherwise, there's enough data on the website along with application information. So if that's of interest, I'm hoping to see 35 applications or so. So please feel free to apply. And of course, if there are any questions, drop us a line. I'm happy to fill.
Awesome. Thank you so much.